1991. At Fox Studios in Los Angeles, California, the famous director Spielberg's Captain Hook was being filmed. However, the filming does not seem to be going very well because Julia Roberts, one of the leading actors, is sucking in and is communicating passionately with Spielberg. From time to time, I can hear the two of them popping up various words such as fox squid, holy crab, and shit. Can force Spielberg, who has a relatively mild personality, to explode, which shows how excessive the big-mouthed Julia Roberts is this time. The crew was silent, and they didn't dare to come out of the atmosphere, so they all hid far away. One is a Hollywood first-line director, and the other is a new American sweetheart. None of them dare to offend, so they can only hide. Only a boy with inch-blonde hair, a height of 1.85 meters, a straight back and slender legs, who looked like he was only in his 20s, watched the two quarrel with interest. These foreigners are really good. Their vocabulary is too lacking. If they want to change me, they can scold 100 sentences without repeating the same. The blonde boy muttered to himself. If someone is next to him, they will find that this inch-haired blonde boy actually speaks Chinese, and there is a big smell of ballast. Such a scene is staged almost every few days, and the inch-haired blonde boys are already surprised. I used to think that Hollywood was very awesome and professional. Everyone is a professional, they all follow the process, and there will be no mistakes at all. But the experience of the crew of Captain Hook in the past few days made the inch-haired blonde boy feel that even Spielberg's crew was nothing more than that. Hey, little Gilbert, why are you still watching the show? Don't go up to persuade you? A blonde girl appeared next to the blonde boy and said to him. The inch-haired blonde boy frowned and said, "How many times have you said it? Call me Big Gilbert, and besides, my Gilbert doesn't hurt." "What do you mean, but don't everyone call you that?" The blonde daughter was puzzled. Forget it. Little Gilbert wanted to tell the blonde girl that little Gilbert was prone to ambiguity in the Chinese context. But people don't understand Chinese. Explain this to her. People don't understand. The blonde girl hurriedly took little Gilberta away and said, Okay, why don't you disappear quickly? After a while, the godfather will quarrel and notice that it will be bad. Little Gilbert snorted. The director won't be so stingy. But he was still very obedient and followed the blonde girl and left the scene of the quarrel together. The blonde girl's name is Gwyneth Paltrow, and she is a relational who was stuffed into the crew and played an important role because of her relationship with Steven Spielberg. To be precise, Gilbert Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow are both related. Little Gilbert relied on his father Gilbert Sr. to ask Spielberg to become an executive director in Captain Hook. Generally, students who have just graduated from the film major have this opportunity to be an executive director directly next to a super director and learn from a super director. Who said that in Hollywood, it's all about ability? Isn't this also a role played by human society, and context? Away from Spielberg and Julia Roberts' quarrel, Gilbert Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow find a place to sit and chat. Little Gilbert, have you written that script about sharks? Gwyneth Paltrow asked. No, why are you asking this? Little Gilbert tickles. Gwyneth Paltrow said as a matter of course, it's written, I'll be the heroine. You. Little Gilbert glanced at Gwyneth Paltrow and said in disgust, you don't quite meet my requirements. Why? Gwyneth Paltrow asked, puzzled. You're not sexy, you're not attractive enough. Little Gilbert said bluntly. This provoked Gwyneth Paltrow's displeasure, and she stood up and lifted her skirt up, revealing her slender legs. Am I not sexy yet? Little Gilbert spread his hands, trying not to look at Gwyneth Paltrow's white thighs, and shirked. Even if you want to be the heroine, now is not the time. When was that? Gwyneth Paltrow sat back down next to Little Gilbert and continued to ask. 18-year-old girl, it's annoying. Little Gilbert was a little impatient, but replied anyway, because it's just the script stage, and I'm just a newcomer in my 20s. In Hollywood, no studio would be willing to shell out millions of dollars for the work of a director in his 20s. Gwyneth Paltrow understood, but she quickly advised, "You don't have to worry about this. I'll take care of the investment. You just let me play the heroine." Little Gilbert looked at Gwyneth Paltrow with suspicion. "You? There are millions. I don't have it, but the film company does, and as long as we get The Godfather's recommendation, we can find a film company that is willing to pay for us." Gwyneth Paltrow said her plan. Little Gilbert spread his hands again, and it seems that this American girl really regards this project as her own. But at the moment, he really doesn't have a good plan to fool those film companies to invest in his own film projects. "I can't afford to pay for it, and no one in Hollywood knows that the elder Gilbert Landrini was a drunken addict in his early years, and he didn't buy any family property at all. As a son, little Gilbert can live to grow up because of his deceased mother's sister, that is, his aunt." Perhaps it was the absurdity of the early years that hollowed out his body, and when he reached old age, the elder Gilbert repented and realized that he could not delay his son's future. So the old Gilbert licked his old face and begged Steven Spielberg to give little Gilbert the opportunity to come to the crew of Captain Hook as an executive director. With such a family situation, it is impossible for you to ask the old Gilbert to shell out a few $1,000,000 more to make a movie, and the little Gilbert is even very suspicious that the old man's savings are not even $10,000. You must know that the concept of overdraft consumption and credit card in North America is very strong, and many ordinary people in North America basically spend in advance. Even little Gilbert himself still has a college loan that has not been repaid, and he has to receive letters from the bank every month to collect debts, which is really annoying. The old man's credit card should have been maxed out a long time ago. As a former well-known producer and a member of the Hollywood Jewish Club, the elder Gilbert took the Landrini family to this point, which is indeed miserable. To be able to stuff little Gilbert into Spielberg's crew, old Gilbert has already tried his best, and he can't ask for more from the old man. In North American society, it is really not easy to find a father who is so worried about his children. So, Gilbert Jr. was intrigued by Gwyneth Paltrow's proposal. Because Gwyneth Paltrow is Spielberg's goddaughter, but the relationship between him and Spielberg is much deeper. As soon as he thought of this, little Gilbert no longer hesitated. If it doesn't meet the aesthetics, it doesn't match. At least this American girl does have long legs. Okay, as long as you can say the director, the position of the female number one belongs to you. In order to increase the chips, Gilbert Jr. also revealed, "Let me tell you in advance, most of my scripts are one-man shows of the heroine." Really? Gwyneth Paltrow was moved, patted little Gilbert on the shoulder and reassured, "Don't worry, I'll convince the Godfather." Okay, then that's settled. The two shook hands happily and reached an agreement. At this time, the passionate exchange between Spielberg and the big-mouthed Julia Roberts ended, and the assistant director shouted, "Start work, start work, start." While waiting for the opportunity, little Gilbert had to continue to work the crew. After all, he still had a college loan to repay. Days passed. Near the end of Captain Hook, little Gilbert finally finished the script. As the days passed and when Captain Hook was about to be completed, Gilbert Jr. finally finished the script. In fact, he had already finished the script. After all, the story was very simple. The reason why it took so long was because Gilbert Jr. had to understand the filmmaking model of Hollywood in the 90s and then think about how to make a movie out of the script. In fact, he had already finished the script. After all, the story was very simple. After all, the experience of being a big director in the previous life could not be used in this era. The reason why it took so long was because Gilbert Jr. had to understand the filmmaking model of Hollywood in the 90s and then think about how to make a movie out of the script. In previous lives, digital cameras had already been developed, but in this era they were still real film cameras. Although the camera is carried by the cameraman, a director is not a competent director if he does not understand these things. After all, the experience of being a big director in the previous life could not be used in this era. From this point of view, it was right to go to Spielberg's crew to study. In previous lives, digital cameras had already been developed, but in this era they were still real film cameras. After all, when it comes to the top Hollywood directors in the 80s and 90s, there must be the name of Steven Spielberg. In Hollywood, hearing this name is the same as hearing the name of the national teacher in China. Although the camera is carried by the cameraman, a director is not a competent director if he does not understand these things. Of course, the prestige of the two in the international film industry is very different, and they cannot be said to be the same. From this point of view, it was right to go to Spielberg's crew to study. After completing the script and understanding the operation mode of Hollywood crews in this era, Gilbert Jr. was confident enough to take the first step. After writing the script, Gilbert Jr. immediately handed over the script to Gwyneth Paltrow, who had been following the project. After all, when it comes to the top Hollywood directors in the 80s and 90s, there must be the name of Steven Spielberg. It's finally finished. Gwyneth Paltrow looked at the script in her hand with satisfaction, took it and ran out. I'll go to The Godfather. You wait for my good news. In Hollywood, hearing this name is the same as hearing the name of the national teacher in China. Script was handed over, and little Gilbert could only hope that this American girl would give him some strength. Otherwise, he would have to wait and seek an opportunity. In the director's lounge, Steven Spielberg was in a relaxed mood as he drank coffee. Of course, the prestige of the two in the international film industry is very different, and they cannot be said to be the same. Recently, the big-mouthed Julia Roberts finally stopped sucking, was more normal, and stopped arguing with him. After completing the script and understanding the operation mode of Hollywood crews in this era, Gilbert Jr. was confident enough to take the first step. To be honest, if Julia Roberts hadn't taken too many shots, Spielberg would have wanted to change the heroine. After so many years in the industry, this is the first time he has encountered such an embarrassing situation. After writing the script, Gilbert Jr. immediately handed over the script to Gwyneth Paltrow, who had been following the project. It's much better now. Julia Roberts sincerely apologized, and Spielberg got off the donkey, taking advantage of the situation to show his generosity and not care. It's finally finished. Gwyneth Paltrow looked at the script in her hand with satisfaction, took it and ran out. I'll go to The Godfather. You wait for my good news. I was thinking about post-production after the completion of the production, and I heard Gwyneth Paltrow's voice from a distance. The Godfather. The script was handed over, and little Gilbert could only hope that this American girl would give him some strength. Otherwise, he would have to wait and seek opportunities. Gwyneth Paltrow is undoubtedly more loved by Spielberg than Julia Roberts. After all, she is her own goddaughter. In the director's lounge, Steven Spielberg was in a relaxed mood as he drank coffee. Spielberg and the Paltrow family have always had a good relationship, and this time they used their personal connections to stuff their goddaughter into the crew, and the producers had no opinion. This kind of thing is very common in Hollywood, and the qualifications and background behind it are useful in Hollywood, even better if you are still Jewish. Recently, the big-mouthed Julia Roberts finally stopped sucking, was more normal, and stopped arguing with him. What's the matter, Gwyn Jr.? Spielberg asked with a friendly smile as he looked at Gwyneth Paltrow as she rushed in. To be honest, if Julia Roberts hadn't taken too many shots, Spielberg would have wanted to change the heroine. Gwyneth Paltrow likes to be called Gwen, which makes her more personality cooler. Of course, only little Gilbert didn't call her that. So Gwyneth Paltrow felt that little Gilbert was very naughty, and he felt like a ruffian and handsome. After so many years in the industry, this is the first time he has encountered such an embarrassing situation. Gwyneth Paltrow handed the script to Spielberg. Godfather, look at this. It's much better now. Julia Roberts sincerely apologized, and Spielberg got off the donkey, taking advantage of the situation to show his generosity and not care. What is this script? Spielberg put down the coffee in his hand and took the script and read it. The name is written on the cover of the script. It is called Shark Beach. Spielberg raised his eyebrows, which is a bit interesting, who imitated Jaws and wrote it. Gwyneth Paltrow introduced at this time, "This is a script written by Little Gilbert. I think it's good, so I'll show it to you." Spielberg didn't open the script to see the specific content, but looked at Gwyneth Paltrow with a smile and asked, "If you can show me the script, did he promise you any conditions?" "Godfather, you are as discerning as Little Gilbert said." Gwyneth Paltrow patted a little ass, and then said, "Yes, but not what he asked, I said it. I said that if I could recommend this script to you, The Godfather, he would promise me the position of the heroine of the movie. He promised. At least I didn't object to." The youngest son of the Landrini family, Spielberg was quite impressed with him. Originally thought that Little Gilbert was a second-generation Hollywood who was waiting for death, but I didn't expect Little Gilbert to be conscientious and responsible in the crew. The things that were explained to him were all done very well and nothing went wrong. Even the crew producers praised Little Gilbert, saying that in impetuous Hollywood, it is quite rare to find a young man like Little Gilbert who is serious and down-to-earth. Spielberg had some early friendships with Gilbert Sr., Gilbert Jr.'s father, but that was limited to that. Old Gilbert begged him to let Little Gilbert join the crew, and he helped with this, which can be regarded as a favor. After exercising in his own crew, Little Gilbert also has a resume. As long as you don't want to be ambitious and work hard, Little Gilbert will not have to worry about running out of food in the future. But I didn't expect Little Gilbert to do this. Spielberg subconsciously thought that it was Little Gilbert's trick to fool his goddaughter and threw her to contact him again, so as to attract investment. At this moment, Little Gilbert's image in Spielberg's heart, which was quite good, suddenly became an impetuous, flamboyant, and opportunistic image. However, the goddaughters showed the script to themselves, and Spielberg still planned to see what good script a young man in his 20s could write. As a result, Spielberg turned the first page of the script and was intrigued. "This was written by Gilbert Jr.?" Spielberg asked, pointing to the sketch manuscript on the first page of the script for Gwyneth Paltrow to see. Gwyneth Paltrow nodded. "Yes, I watched him write, and there are other storyboard manuscripts behind me." Why did this manuscript surprise Spielberg? It was because Gilbert Jr. showed his ideas on the manuscript about how to shoot the film. To put it simply, it is to create a shark perspective and see the process of how the heroine in the script escapes from the perspective of a shark. This is a very innovative way of filming in the 21st century, but it was a very innovative way to shoot in the 90s. Spielberg can become one of Hollywood's top directors, and he is not a straw bag, and he can see the excellence of this kind of shooting technique at a glance. When shooting thrillers or horror films, such perspectives and shots can undoubtedly greatly increase the sense of substitution and excitement. I don't dare to say that I will definitely succeed, but the fact that Little Gilbert can come up with this idea proves that he is not talking in vain, but has made serious preparations. Spielberg hurriedly flipped to the back again, and sure enough, a few storyboard manuscripts were attached, through which the movie picture could already be imagined. "Little Gwen, you go and call Little Gilbert, and I'll talk to him," Spielberg commanded. Gwyneth Paltrow was overjoyed, and Spielberg wanted to see Little Gilbert, which meant that there was a play, and hurriedly trotted out to call Little Gilbert in. Before entering, Gwyneth Paltrow also instructed Little Gilbert, "Don't talk big in front of the Godfather. He hates big talkers the most." Normal performance, what to say? "I see." Little Gibber nodded, took a deep breath, and went inside. Little Gilbert clearly knew whether he could get the opportunity to direct, so he looked at it with a shudder. Unlike the grumpy truck driver James Cameron, Spielberg Hollywood is notoriously good-natured. For example, the big-mouthed Julia Roberts had a quarrel with Spielberg before, and if he was replaced by a truck driver, he would definitely not hesitate to replace the big-mouthed Julia Roberts. But Spielberg was able to tolerate it and continue to work with Julia Roberts, regardless of his previous suspicions, which is enough to see his good temper. Of course, this is the only time, and after that, Julia Roberts will not want to receive any more invitations from Spielberg, and she will not even be eligible for auditions. Faced with little Gilbert who fooled his goddaughter, Spielberg felt that he couldn't give him a good look. But seeing little Gilbert come in and say hello respectfully, Spielberg's bad face couldn't be put on display in an instant. "Come, sit down." Spielberg told little Gilbert to sit down, turning to the assistant and instructing, "Pour me a cup of coffee." "Water will do," Gilbert Jr. said. The assistant looked at Spielberg. Spielberg nodded, and the assistant went to pour water. When the water reached little Gilbert, Spielberg asked, "Little Gilbert, did you write the script that little Gwen handed me over?" Although the idea is not his own, the writing must be written by himself, and little Gilbert admits without hesitation, "Yes, I wrote the script." "Oh, how did you come up with this story?" "I briefly read the script and found that your script has nothing to do with my Jaws, except for sharks." Spielberg was curious about that. Here little Gilbert is about to perform the trick Daffa. "Director, just call me Uncle." "Okay, Uncle Steven, I've always been a big fan of you. When I was 5 years old, my father took me to the cinema to see Jaws. That's when I wanted to create a shark story on my own, and the idea grew up as I got older and came into contact with the film industry, and it became the script I am today." The reasons given by Gilbert Jr. were very good, and Spielberg couldn't find anything wrong with them. Spielberg asked again, "You wrote this script and asked Gwen Jr. to show me. Did you have the intention to let me name this movie?" "I didn't think so at all." Little Gilbert stood up and didn't mind the water spilling from his glass. "When I first started writing the script, I didn't expect to get your recommendation. It's just that Gwyneth was very enthusiastic to help, and I just pushed the boat." "I see. Gwen Jr. told me too." Spielberg motioned to little Gilbert not to get agitated and to sit down first. Then, Spielberg and Gilbert Jr. talked about the script, or creative ideas for the film, including shooting ideas, etc. In the process, Spielberg is also observing the state of Gilbert Jr. to see what kind of mental state he is. If little Gilbert was the kind of big talker, unpragmatic, boasting about how good he would have done, Spielberg would never have helped him. But unexpectedly, little Gilbert is very pragmatic, and little Gilbert has thought about every step from planning to implementation. Pragmatism and imagination, two somewhat contradictory words, are reflected in little Gilbert. It should be said that in Hollywood, every successful film director is basically a combination of two words. It seems that little Gilbert inherited the film talent of his father Gilbert Sr., but did not inherit the impetuous character of the old Gilbert, which is much better. After chatting about his general thoughts on the movie, Spielberg also concluded his basic examination of Gilbert Jr. Last question. If little Gwen had to be the heroine, would you say yes? Spielberg asked. Little Gilbert thought for a moment before replying, "If the audition meets the requirements, I will definitely say yes." Spielberg is more satisfied, has a bottom line, and will think about the movie. In the same way, if you are flexible, you will give favors and face to you. "Okay, that's all for today. I'll take this script away. You have no opinion, right?" Spielberg smiled. "Of course, Uncle Steven." Little Gilbert smiled. Spielberg accepted the script and was almost certain that he would recommend it to the studio. But there is an uncertain factor here, which is whether little Gilbert can be a director, which is very crucial. Don't overestimate the conscience and confidence of the film company. People must be very interested in the shark movie recommended by Spielberg. After all, there is a precedent for the success of Jaws. But if you know that the director is a young man in his 20s, he will definitely strongly demand a more stable director. There is a saying in China that it is impossible to do things without hair. Hollywood studio executives don't understand Chinese, but they understand the same truth. So young people have very few opportunities to gain trust. After all, it is about millions or even tens of millions of investments. Of course, Gilbert Jr. can also bring money into the group. But unfortunately, the Landrini family is only a name and a little more valuable and nothing else. Gilbert Jr. still has to pay off a loan to go to college, and he doesn't have the money to invest in a movie. In fact, at the beginning, little Gilbert also thought about making a Blair the Witch, or a ghost record. After all, these two movies are both examples of horror films with super small investment and high box office, and they are not very difficult to shoot. But after some trade-offs, Gilbert Jr. also vetoed the two films. There are two reasons for this. The first is the environment. 1991 is not 1999 or 2009 after all. The explosion of Blair the Witch and Ghost Record is inseparable from the development of the internet. At the time of the appearance of these two films, the speed of internet development in North America had reached a peak, and the number of netizens and internet access was the largest region in the world. But what time is it? It was 1991, just last year, and the world's first publicly accessible web pages and web browsers were born. Microsoft has only recently released Windows 3.0, which has established itself as the supremacy of the PC operating system. Also last year, the world's first operator to provide network services was just established. According to statistics, in 1991, there were only about 4.2 million internet users in the United States. Although it is still the first in the world, it is too small and the base is not large. When Blair the Witch was released in 1999, there were more than 110 million internet users in the United States. 4,200,000 to 110 million, this account is very easy to calculate. The gap between the internet, which is an important propaganda base, is so big that the tricks used in Blair the Witch are not good in 1991. One of the reasons why internet publicity is so important to Blair the Witch and Ghost Record is, in addition to the contagious and proliferating nature of the internet, to save money. In recent years, film promotion has been carried out through newspaper media, television media, offline advertising, and other means. These all cost money, and none of them come cheap. For a movie with an investment of tens of thousands, you ask the film company to pay you tens of millions of publicity expenses. Without God's perspective, most of the film company executives will think that you are sick. Therefore, as the first film of a rookie director, it is not that the investment is as small as possible, but that it is an appropriate investment. The second reason is Gilbert Jr.'s own reasons. Of course, he knew that Blair the Witch, or Ghost Record, was easy to shoot and really had no technical difficulties. But as a film director, there are no challenges that Gilbert Jr. finds interesting enough. Little Gilbert likes to be challenged, and only by daring to challenge can he face bigger storms. Now it depends on whether Spielberg can give it or not, and whether he can move the top management of the film company and give Little Gilbert a chance to challenge. Development. Little Gilbert is out the door, and Gwyneth Paltrow is waiting outside the door. Seeing Little Gilbert come out, Gwyneth Paltrow hurriedly stepped forward and asked with a concerned face, "How is it? Did it work?" Little Gilberton nodded and replied, "Uncle Stephen took the script away and said he would recommend it to the studio." "I knew that." Gwyneth Paltrow patted Little Gilbert on the shoulder, and it hurt him. Gwyneth Paltrow didn't seem to feel anything and said excitedly, "I have asked you to call Uncle. I must be very optimistic about you. With The Godfather's recommendation, your script will definitely be favored by the top management of the film company." Little Gilbert pursed his lips. He didn't think things would go so well. You won't succeed without going through some twists and turns, and that's how novels are written. Gwyneth Paltrow was a little talker. It's a big deal. Let's go celebrate. How about going to the bar? Little Gilbert glanced at Gwyneth Paltrow and said suspiciously, "You're not 21 yet. Can you go to the bar?" Gwyneth Paltrow said with a smug face, "Don't worry, I know a place that doesn't have these rules and regulations. Just follow me." With that, Gwyneth Paltrow took little Gilbert's hand and went to the bar to celebrate. The bar is close to the Black community, and it's one of the less secure areas of Los Angeles. The bar is open here, and as long as nothing happens, the LAPD doesn't bother to care. As a result, many bars here have many young people under the age of 21, even minors. When he arrived at the place, little Gilbert saw that there was a long queue at the door and said to Gwyneth Paltrow, "Forget it, there are a lot of people." Gwyneth Paltrow took little Gilbert's hand directly and walked towards the door, flashed a card to the bartender, and the family let him go directly. "Wow," asked little Gilbert in surprise. "What card are you holding?" "Nonsense, of course it's a membership card. I got it from my cousin." Gwyneth Paltrow took it for granted, but little Gilbert didn't think it was as simple as it was. Anyway, the two of them entered the bar and sat down near the bar. "Drink something? I'm the heroine of the movie," Gwyneth Paltrow said generously. Little Gilbert didn't show any gentlemanly demeanor at this time, mainly because he was shy and didn't want to be treated. "I want a cup of Long Island iced tea," Gilbert Jr. said. Come to the bar and drink Long Island iced tea. It's really yours," Gwyneth Paltrow complained. That being said, Gwyneth Paltrow called the waiter and asked for a whiskey and a Long Island iced tea. Little Gilbert looked around and surveyed the bar. Strippers writhed around the poles on stage, and in the center of the dance floor, many men and women indulged in wantonness. The seats next to the dance floor were also full, and many of them were suffocating, and little Gilbert didn't think it was smoking. Everyone who has been here knows that in North American bars, big asterisk hemp and sex are two indispensable necessities, and alcohol is secondary. If you want a drink, you should go to Qingba instead of coming here. Gwyneth Paltrow drank 2 sips of whiskey, a bit of a head, and the absence of parental discipline made her feel free. At this time, seeing that someone was smoking big asterisk hemp, she and little Gilbert said to her, who was drunk, "Little Gilbert, let's go get some to suck." With that, Gwyneth Paltrow was about to get some, but was stopped by little Gilberta. "I don't suck this, and I think you'd better not suck it either," Gilbert Jr. said. If Gwyneth Paltrow's parents had said this, Gwyneth Paltrow would have been disgusted. After all, adolescence was rebellious and felt that his parents interfered with his freedom. But what little Gilbert said, Gwyneth Paltrow could hear. "All right then, I'll listen to you, let's go dance." Little Gilbert had no reason to refuse, so the two ran to the center of the dance floor and began to shake their bodies to the rhythm of the music. Perhaps because little Gilbert was too attractive, after a while, little Gilbert was crowded with girls shaking with him. Gwyneth Paltrow didn't squeeze in, looked at little Gilbert who was enjoying it, and returned to her seat in a huff. While watching little Gilbert dance, Gwyneth Paltrow turned down the invitation of the 3 boys, keeping her eyes on little Gilbert. The lights in the center of the dance floor were dim, and little Gilbert couldn't recognize who was who, but he felt that there were so many girls around, and the strong smell of perfume almost made him die. At this moment, a hand like a snake kept swimming on little Gilbert's body, slowly going down, unbuttoning little Gilbert's trouser belt, and going down. Little Gilbert struck a spirit, quickly pulled away his little snake-like hand, and fled, leaving a freckled miniskirt brown-haired girl with a stunned face. Seeing little Gilbert escape, Gwyneth Paltrow asked, "What's wrong?" "Little." Gilbert was shocked. "Someone picked my pants." Gwyneth Paltrow was stunned for a moment, then sneered, "Ha ha ha, then you don't hurry up and enjoy it? Who knows if it's a human or a ghost? I don't know if it's not a beauty, I'm not interested." Little Gilbert took a sip of Long Island iced tea to suppress his shock. The main thing is that I didn't expect it. No, are these American girls so open? Pick people's pants at every turn. Little Gilbert, whose soul comes from the East, said that he could not accept this stimulation for the time being and that he had not yet adapted to it. When Gwyneth Paltrow heard this, she stood up and grabbed little Gilbert by the collar, and the two were very close. "Look, are you interested in me?" "You." Little Gilbert was tempted to say something against his will, to say that he was not interested. But when he heard the name Gwyneth Paltrow, he was interested. After all, it was Pepper. In addition, this American girl's legs are really long. As a long-legged control, little Gilbert expressed great interest. "You're the heroine of my movie, and of course I'm interested," little Gilbert replied. "Really?" Gwyneth Paltrow strained, and the two of them drew closer, almost face to face, and could feel each other's breath on each other's faces. At this distance, it's either to quarrel or kiss. Looking at Gwyneth Paltrow's thin and delicate lips, little Gilbert couldn't hold back after all and bit it. A hint of smugness flashed in the corner of Gwyneth Paltrow's eyes, satisfied with her charm, and then responded more enthusiastically to little Gilbert's kiss. The two separated after a wave of air exchange, and little Gilbert quickly apologized. "I'm sorry, I didn't hold back." "You don't have to apologize." Gwyneth Paltrow put her finger on little Gilbert's mouth, telling him to take it back and bite it again. No one in the bar paid attention to the movements of the two, because in the bar, there were many people like the two of them, hugging each other and nibbling a lot. What's more, in many private rooms on the second floor of the bar, the most primitive human movement is being carried out and the passionate desire is released. After this kiss, Gwyneth Paltrow took little Gilbert's arm and smiled. "Let's leave this." Of course. The story that happened next was very simple. The two went out of the bar, hailed a car at the door, and then started holding and gnawing again in the back seat of the car. Gwyneth Paltrow also wanted to take off her clothes, which she thought were annoying, but were stopped by little Gilbert. Taxi drivers seem to be accustomed to this, and they look at their noses and noses, but they don't see them. Back at the hotel where the crew was staying, Gwyneth Paltrow took little Gilbertra directly into her room. The one where little Gilbert stayed was for two people, which was not very convenient. Now, without the interference of outsiders, the two were able to study the differences in the physiological structure of men and women, and they enjoyed it. After drinking and exercising vigorously, the two didn't even take a shower and slept until the next morning. When he woke up in the morning, little Gilbert felt empty around him, but the sound from the bathroom clearly told him what had happened last night. "Well, isn't that a little too fast?" Little Gilbert thought as he looked at the chandelier in the room. At this time, Gwyneth Paltrow came out with a bath towel in her body and wiped her wet hair. Seeing that little Gilbert was still lying on the bed, he urged, "Honey, don't go take a shower yet. The crew will start work in a while." After one night, little Gilbert managed to turn into the darling in Gwyneth Paltrow's mouth. Looking at it like this, Gwyneth Paltrow is afraid that it is not an unforgettable night, but has the meaning of long-term development. Little Gilbert didn't think much about it, hurriedly took a shower, then slipped to his room to change clothes, and honestly got to work. In this way, little Gilbert and Gwyneth Paltrow met from time to discuss physiological issues. The two didn't say that they would become boyfriend and girlfriend, but this relationship is beyond friendship. Let's call it a temporary partner. And the most important thing for little Gilbert is the movie Shark Beach. Half a month has passed since Spielberg took the script, and the crew is nearing completion, but there is still no news from Spielberg's side. Little Gilbert was nervously waiting for the opportunity to come. Universal Pictures Executive Conference, a conference on the new science fiction film Jurassic Park, is taking place. Spielberg finished filming Captain Hook, and in addition to being busy with post-production, he came to attend this conference. Before the original novel of Jurassic Park was published, Spielberg had already discussed this story about dinosaurs with the author and well-known screenwriter Michael Clayton. Since then, Spielberg has also been following the progress of the novel's creation, and he is keenly aware that the novel is a good fit for a movie. Sure enough, he is not the only one who has vision. When Michael Crichton's novel came out of shape, it sparked a scramble from Warner Brothers Pictures, Columbia Pictures, 20th Century Fox, and Universal Pictures. Finally, Spielberg helped Universal Pictures get the project last year with his good relationship with Michael Clayton. In order for Michael Clayton to adapt the script himself, Universal Pictures also paid an additional $500,000. During Spielberg's filming of Captain Hook, Michael Clayton completed the adaptation of the script, so it was time to discuss the project. After Universal Pictures won the rights to the film adaptation last year, it said that the film would best be directed by Spielberg himself. But Spielberg wanted to finish filming Schindler's List before directing Jurassic Park, and a disagreement arose. Later, Sid Sheinburn, president of the American Music Company, communicated with Spielberg and asked Spielberg to finish filming Jurassic Park first. Sid Sheinburn knew Spielberg and knew that after he finished filming Schindler's List, he would no longer be interested in Jurassic Park. That's not okay. American Music is the parent company of Universal Pictures, and it's a for-profit company. Sid Sheinburn is not Jewish, so he doesn't care what the list is not on. Of course, in order to appease Spielberg, Sid Sheinburn also instructed the senior management of Universal Pictures to give Spielberg some convenience. Even if Spielberg wants to install one of his own people as the male number one, he can agree. But unexpectedly, before the project approval meeting was held, Universal Pictures changed owners. After Sony acquired Columbia Pictures in 1989, the rest of the major Japanese conglomerates were also ready to move. Eventually, with the help of Michael Ovitz, a well-known Hollywood agent, Panasonic acquired Universal Pictures in December 1990. Not only Universal Pictures itself, but also wealthy Japanese conglomerates directly bought the MCA TV Group, MCA Home Video and Pay TV, American cable networks, publishing companies, theme parks, and Universal's vast film and television database. At this time, Japanese businessmen claimed to want to buy the whole of the United States. Of course, it won't be long before Panasonic regrets his impulsiveness. Because the entertainment industry and the appliance manufacturing industry are completely different things. The change of the parent company did not affect the operation of Universal Pictures, and the establishment of Jurassic Park was still on the agenda. The new Japanese parent company knew that Universal Pictures was preparing a big sci-fi project, and the parent company Matsushita Electric couldn't sit still and urgently needed to exchange the acquisition for actual profits. The new president, Akio Tani, was instructed to agree to whatever Spielberg offered. So, in the anticipation of Akio Tani, this project about Jurassic Park finally began after Spielberg finished filming Captain Hook. During the meeting, everyone discussed in detail the preliminary project establishment, preparation, actor casting, etc. Spielberg knew the project by heart, and he told Vice President Lou Vasseur, "I sent Harrison an invitation before, did he reply?" Lou Vasseur shook his head and said, "Harrison turned down the invitation for the male lead, and we invited William Hurt, but he refused without even reading the script." Spielberg raised an eyebrow, a little surprised, but he still said, "It's okay. The film is still early. We can slowly choose the right actors." At this time, Akio Tani said, "Director Spielberg, Mr. Matsushita, the chairman of our Panasonic Electric, has always admired you and specially instructed me that you can put forward any conditions you have. All my requirements are written in the director's contract, nothing else." Spielberg said, remembering the script that Gilbert Jr. had given him, and asked his assistant to bring it in. "There's really a thing, you can take a look at this script first." Thinking in advance about recommending it to Universal Pictures, The assistant printed a few more copies so that the executives at the meeting could read them. When Levasseur saw that the name on the cover of the script was Shark Beach, he immediately reacted to stress, remembering Spielberg's Jaws in 1975. "This is the sequel to Jaws?" Levasseur asked. "No," Spielberg explained. "It's a script written by an executive director under my staff, and he wants to be an independent director, so I'm going to recommend it to you." To get the recommendation of a top director, presumably this script is not simple, so the executives of Universal Pictures took the script seriously. The story of the script is very simple. It is the story of how a girl escaped from the mouth of a shark, and there is nothing unusual. If anything, the protagonist is a woman. There are also several storyboard manuscripts attached to the script, which are used to detail a novel way of shooting, which is also very special. Except for Akio Tani, all of them are senior film industry professionals, and they immediately thought about the possibility of this Shark Beach and whether there are any profit prospects. Or Levasseur asked Spielberg, "Is it Bruce Cohen?" Bruce Cohen has long served as Spielberg's deputy, and if it were him, Universal Pictures would be relieved to invest boldly in the film. Who knew that Spielberg still shook his head and said, "No, it's little Gilbert Landrini." "Who?" Levasseur said he had never heard of the name. Spielberg had to explain, "Old Gilbert knows, right? The producer who lost all his fortune? Well, good things don't go out. Bad things spread thousands of miles. Little Gilbert's cheap father knows all about Hollywood." "That's right," Spielberg nodded. "This is a script written by his son Gilbert Jr., who wants to direct the film himself." A global executive who knew Gilbert Sr. well said at this time, "If memory serves, Gilbert Sr.'s son is only 21 years old this year. Can he do it?" Wanting to direct a film independently at the age of 21 is simply whimsical. Even Spielberg was 29 years old when he directed Jaws, and the 21-year-old Gilbert Jr. was just a fledgling kid. Spielberg detailed the situation with Gilbert Jr. "I talked to Gilbert Jr., and he was very serious and pragmatic in my crew, and he didn't have whimsical ideas. If Gwen hadn't given me the script, I wouldn't have known Gilbert Jr. would have had the ability to write this script. We exchanged ideas for this script, and he had neither self-esteem nor inferiority, so I thought it would be worth giving it a try." That being said, the script was also recommended by Spielberg, but the Universal Pictures executives still felt it needed to be considered. If Gilbert Jr. was a few years older and made some achievements to let people in the industry know about him, it would be much easier to seek a directing opportunity. Now, even with Spielberg's endorsement, everyone still won't trust a fledgling young man. Levasseur suggested, "Why don't we switch to another more mature director? Gilbert Jr. can give him a script buyout fee." Although he didn't have much contact with Gilbert Jr., Spielberg felt that Gilbert Jr. was the same kind of person as himself. "I don't think Gilbert Jr. will give his heart and soul to someone else to direct. He will insist on directing himself," Spielberg said. "It would be a shame that if so, Universal Pictures can't invest in this film." Levasseur's tone was clearly not too regretful. There are so many similar scripts in Universal's library that if Spielberg hadn't recommended them, the script wouldn't have even been discussed at a high-level meeting. "Why did you say that you didn't pay for copying the script?" This is something that Hollywood studios can really do. However, the Landrini family is also one of the members of Hollywood, although they have a miserable life, but they are always insiders. Copying one's own people's things, Universal Pictures can't do it.